to Star Wars Music Minute, where we celebrate the music and sound of Star Wars 5 cinematic minutes at a time. I'm Kris and Xanthe, you can call me Xanthe, and today we are talking about the soundscape of the Cantina in minutes 46 through 50 of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. This entire set of minutes takes place at what we now know as Chalmun's Spaceport Cantina, where a band of Bith musicians entertains a diverse array of patrons. There's a minor altercation that we witness. Luke and Obi-Wan meet Han and Chewie, and we learn about the Millennium Falcon. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Kris, also known as Star Wars Lawyer, and we're going to be talking through this scene together. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. This is like actually a really groundbreaking scene for so many reasons, and it's a delight to get to go into it with some depth today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I'll start out by just like throwing something out there as to like why this is particularly a groundbreaking, or like the ways that I'm thinking about it. So on one hand, there's the music. And so on this podcast, we're talking about the soundscape as a whole, like as it works with the film, not just these things in isolated, like the music just on the soundtrack, like just when you put it in your stereo speakers and whatever. We're really thinking about how it works with the scene as a whole and how like all of the filmmaking elements work together to tell this story. And this is a part where like I think the music and sound design are doing so much work, and I think like a little bit underappreciated work to sell this scene. Because I mean, a lot of departments I feel like are really giving it their all, like with costuming, even though some of it, the lore behind the making of the costumes and the funny masks and like how some things came together and whatever, like there's a lot of talk already about this scene. But I feel like the music and the sound design, both of them, and the sound mixing, like I feel like all of those spheres add to it so much.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I just, when you sent me the clip, I watched it twice initially, like once, just watching it like I would normally. The second time, just like with my eyes closed, just listening to it, and then, like seeing it in my head and really just being able to hear all the, not just like the music, the dialogue, just the different sounds, the different aliens make and everything like that, because this is a bar scene. So it's fundamentally different than, just being in a normal crowd.
What did you observe when you were just listening to it?
So in my mind, I think this is truly the first scene where we really feel like we're in a galaxy far, far away. You have the opening crawl go into the starship, the Star Destroyer, and you're in space. But now you've not only are seeing aliens, you're hearing them, and there are different ones of different kind. They speak differently. The way they grunt, the way they move is all different. And this is also like our first taste of diegetic music in the Star Wars universe. So it's interesting to hear how that sort of moves with the scene.
Yeah, absolutely. You're totally right. This is the first time we hear diegetic music in Star Wars, which has since then become such a big part. Like I look forward to every new thing that comes out. Just looking forward to if there will be any sort of diegetic music, because it's always super exciting, and the Cantina really set a high bar for that. And not only diegetic music, but there's all this other sound that is quote unquote like diegetic to the world, like the aliens, like you mentioned. And also I will say that like, what do you think of the choice of like the style of music that they decided to go with to represent this cantina on Tatooine?
Yeah, it's sort of interesting, the contrast, because prior to the scene starting, you have Obi-Wan saying, never is there such a place of scum and villainy. And when you have that expectation, you think it's going to be like dark, sort of just like maybe not really like jazzy music, but like bass strings type music, so low and smooth, and then you come here, it's upbeat and everything, while you have all these criminals like hanging out and drinking at a bar, but it's really peppy, and you're just like, oh yeah, I just want to bounce to it, contrast to what's going on in the scene, and I
Yeah.
think it's perfectly appropriate when Luke unintentionally picks a fight with the two aliens, that it's just like, wow, are we really going to see our hero get beat up to such upbeat music?
It's really funny that you say that. So there, I don't know if you've heard much about like why they decided to go with this type of music, but basically it was George Lucas's idea. He was listening to a lot of like Benny Goodman at the time,
Hmm.
and was just like, this was something that he always had in his. This is something that he had this specific vision for. And if you go back and like read some interviews and things like that. Here's a quote. Okay, so do you know what a temp track is?
Is that the track that they lay under it before the score is done?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, so here's a quote. In addition to the symphonic underscore, Williams fashioned two pieces of source music for the alien bar sequence at Mos Eisley Spaceport. Okay, wait, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so here is what George Lucas told John Williams. Can you imagine Can you imagine several creatures in a future century finding some 1930s Benny Goodman swing band music in a time capsule or under a rock someplace, and how they might attempt to interpret it? So that's what we
Yeah.
got.
And it totally fits now.
Yep. And not only that, but well, here's another quote, and I'm actually going to play a sound clip from the soundtrack show, which is David W. Collins's show. He did a three-part series on A New Hope, or on Star Wars, and in part two, which I'll put in the show notes, like the way that he reads this quote is just so funny. I just, instead of reading what he said, I'm just going to put a clip of David Collins's show here, because all credit to him for finding this quote and for delivering it so hilariously.
Here's a quote from Jonathan Rinsler's 2007 book, The Making of Star Wars. This is editor Richard Shue talking. Quote, George was having a lot of fun. He would bring in a record whenever he got back from L.A. He would have a new idea for the temp track, which was the best way for him to convey to Johnny Williams what he wanted. But I didn't know which way he wanted to go with the music at first. The first time we talked about it was when I was editing that Cantina sequence. So I said to him, Hey George, have you ever heard Tibetan music? Because I think the chanting and the animal bone instruments might really be appropriate. And he said, No, I'm going to use Benny Goodman. And I went, What? And he said, Yeah, they're going to play swing, man. End quote.
So I feel like that's George Lucas for you.
Oh yeah, 100%. And it works so well. When people say Star Wars music, and you think like Imperial March, the Binary Sunset, prequels wise, you Duel of the Fates, Cross the Stars, Battle of the Heroes, but Cantina Band is probably one of the, I would say maybe number two behind the main theme, that if you just went out to anybody in the world and started playing it, and they'll be like, oh, that's from Star Wars.
Yeah, totally. I actually graduated to this piece of music. I went to a school where the graduation ceremonies are very non-traditional, and everyone got to pick their own like music for when they walked across stage. So this was my music.
Oh, I wish I could have done that. It definitely would have been Star Wars as well, but I wish I could have done that.
Yeah, it was pretty great. People clapped when they heard the music. I graduated from that school twice, and the second time I graduated from there, I picked Augie's municipal band for my, and not very many people recognize that one, but that's fine. I did. Um, so back to Benny Goodman. Okay, do you know who Benny Goodman is?
I've heard on my dad has definitely mentioned the name once or 50 times.
Oh, cool. So Benny Goodman is like, that's a name that I've always known, but didn't like really know until I specifically looked him up and found out like what actual songs are associated with him. And as soon as I started hearing his music, I was like, oh yeah, definitely. I definitely know Benny Goodman. I just didn't know that I knew Benny Goodman. So for those listening, Benny Goodman is known as the King of Swing. And he was a clarinet player, a band leader, and this was mainly in the 30s. And swing music is a type of jazz. So it's not unrelated, but swing music is sort of characterized by being more rhythmic in a way that is like danceable. So it became really popular in the 30s, like until the end of World War II, and it like encourages dancing, and it was often performed by big bands. So that's where this comes in. Another thing is when they were filming this, I'm going to pull out this book. This is Star Wars, Absolutely Everything You Need to Know. Okay. On page 112, which is about the Cantina Band, it says, peek behind the scenes. Crew members playing Bith musicians in the cantina moved to the beat of Benny Goodman's 1937 hit Sing, Sing, Sing while filming on set. So I'm going to play a clip from that. So, okay. In this scene, there's a part where like it goes to like a close up to the Bith musicians and they're kind of like, I don't know, moving their bodies to the beat of the music. So when they're actually filming this, they didn't have the music of the cantina scene yet. So they had to like have an alternate piece of music playing so that they could just like act along to the beat, you know? And so this was the song. It's so fun. I didn't realize that was Benny Goodman, for one, which obviously super, super famous song. And honestly, I went through such a swing like deep dive yesterday. I like listened to so much Benny Goodman and it made me appreciate the cantina music so much more.
Yeah, I think now that you've said that, I'm just gonna go in a deeper dive and just start listening to more of it, and just because I as soon as you start playing, you can instantly hear the influence that it had.
Totally, and not only that, but like it was temp tracked too, and I feel like it's funny because in a way, like this sort of swing music is canon because it's diegetic music. So last season we were going through The Last Jedi, and one cue from that movie is I think really underrated, and it's the Canto Bight one, which has a lot of similarities to this. And in that episode, or in one of those episodes, and if you want to revisit, it was episode 11, with Tyler Hunt, who is the steel panist for the Canto Bight track in The Last Jedi. He told me that when John Williams was like telling them how to play this, or the Canto Bight track, he basically said like a very similar thing to what he told them to what the instructions were for the cantina. So what Tyler told me, and I texted him this morning just to confirm, he said for Canto Bight, it was like aliens found old jazz sheet music and had to play with whatever weird instruments they had. He didn't say Benny Goodman that time. He said Artie Shaw, but another famous clarinet playing band leader of that same era. So the Cantina Band and the Canto Bight track have so much, have a lot in common.
Yeah, I think the homages that I think are missed by everyday fans that don't know to even dive deep into music. Like I didn't know that part because I haven't taken that much of a look into the sequel era music besides the Jedi Steps, because that is my favorite track in the sequels by far.
So, well, here's Canto Bight has a lot of different parts. There's Honestly, I think it's a very underrated track. Oh, I think I already played that. But anyway, if we compare that to the Cantina, they're like very much almost the same tempo.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they both have steel pan drums. They both have like buzzing sort of instruments.
Mm-hmm. You hear the maracas.
So, I mean, I'm playing those Canto Bight tracks just because I think there's like connective tissue there between that and Cantina, and with the instruments being used, the vibes being gone for in at least in approaching like this sort of jazz idiom, but from a Star Wars perspective. I don't know. I think it's very interesting.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I think Star Wars music is so much deeper than. I mean, granted, you have the GOAT John Williams doing most of it until you get to Michael Giacchino, and then I don't remember who did solo.
John Powell.
Okay, yeah, and so there's so much that resonates with the music that we don't look to because we're all fascinated with like the sound design and with the world that's going on. Like we get so much caught up in the action of what's going on that we don't really hear the music. It's just sort of like intrinsically there.
Yeah, I think. Well, one thing about John Williams is he's really known for his like symphonic works, or his symphonic scoring, and prior to doing like Star Wars, like especially some of his earlier works are super jazzy. Like he's actually really, really like an accomplished like jazz composer. And this, like, I feel like this was also like really in his wheelhouse to do.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay, so another really interesting thing about the way that the Cantina Band plays out in this is, well, okay, the mixing of the music. I'm going to play some examples because here is the scene starts kind of a little bit after the beginning of the Cantina Band song. Like this is if you're like on the soundtrack. Now in canon or like in universe, Cantina Band has an actual name, and the name of the song is "Mad About Me." And by the way, Cantina Band 2 is called "If I Only Could Let Go and Cry." So the fact that they're called Cantina Band and Cantina Band 2 on the soundtrack, it says more about that's like from the score perspective, from the soundtrack perspective. Because I think scoring and soundtrack, like scoring is for the benefit of the audience. But if we were in the world and we were like, hey, Dan, Figrin D'an and the Modal Nodes, like play "Mad About Me," we would hear the Cantina song. Now on the
I also think those names are oddly or aptly appropriate for Star Wars fans because Star Wars fans are
mad about me.
Star Wars.
Oh, if only I could let go and cry. Oh,
yes, right. Anybody that has watched Clone Wars Rebels.
That's so funny. I can totally see someone like Zeb from Rebels just like I don't know, laying back and just listening to a song called "If Only I Could Let Go and Cry," just like really big on like a boombox. Okay, so back to the Cantina. This is what you hear on the soundtrack. But that's not quite what you hear in the scene. So here's the corresponding part from the scene. So right off the bat, that's a different vibe, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't sound like you're playing a soundtrack. It's like not like a crystal clear recording. It sounds like you're in the space with it.
Right. Like what I relate it to is, when you go watch the film version of a movie, for some reason, Sing is in my head because I watched that with my nieces. But you listen to them singing because, they're performing a concert. So it's more of a live feel. And then you go listen to the soundtrack and it's different because that one is supposed to be purely recorded because they, recorded it in the studio that way.
That's a really good point. I feel like I've gone on a little bit of a well, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but I think this is why Tatooine Rhapsody is also, if we're talking about Star Wars Visions, which we're not here, which I think Tatooine Rhapsody did a really good job of making the performance in that short sound like it was actually a performance and not like you turn on the soundtrack, which is how a lot of like movie musicals and how a lot of things are, I would say in movies, where sometimes it doesn't feel like a performance. It feels like the actor went into a studio and it's definitely super edited and you're supposed to believe like that they're doing a live performance, but it definitely doesn't feel that way. Anyway, okay,
Right.
we're not talking about that. But so the reason it sounds like that is because it's called worldizing. And that's something that Ben Burtt does a lot in Star Wars. It was actually a term coined by Walter Murch, and he sort of started using this technique on American Graffiti. So
Hmm.
it comes from another George Lucas film. And basically, worldizing a sound is like when you when you take steps to make it sound like it is natively coming from the source. And so different ways that they would do this at the time would be, I mean, you could put different effects on it, but like they would even do it with the droids. Like they would play the droid sounds from speakers in the actual, like on set or like in, or when recording things instead of just doing it all through like the computer or like, overlaying it all digitally and then putting effects. Like basically it would be like, to make it sound more real, it would be like, here's an example. Okay. So I'm going to play the Cantina Band. Let me do this. I'm doing this. I have my Logic Pro open on my computer. And so if we play just the recording from the soundtrack. Now, if I were to put a low cut filter on that, which just means I'm cutting out the low end. Let me do some of that. Okay, I'm going to put a low cut. Okay. And now let me also add a reverb so it sounds like we're in like a club. Sounds like we're in a villa lobby. I don't know. Compared to,
Yeah.
see, it's like a versus. So basically, in this scene, we don't just get like the soundtrack version, which sounds really clear and nice and whatever. You get this version where it's like clearly you're in this jumbled room and it's like playing from somewhere. Sometimes you hear it like behind you, sometimes you hear it like more on the left. It really feels like you're in this space.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I think even and more characteristic of that, not more characteristic, but another example of that is when the confrontation happens between Obi-Wan and the thugs because the music stops while everybody's looking at what's going on.
Yeah.
And then it ends and everybody's just like, all right, back to the music.
Which I have to say is like so realistic. It's so realistic as someone who has played many gigs where sometimes you just have to grit your teeth and be like, oh my God, I guess we have to just continue. Okay.
Not my business. Going on.
I think I'm fascinated with how musicians are portrayed in Star Wars. That's just, something I always kind of pay attention to. And I think there are many things about this particular band that are so realistic, and the way that music is used in that context, like where it stops and then it continues and it kind of moves on to Cantina song number 2, because they're like actually playing a set. It's not like just one song over and over again. Like it's all pretty realistic. The only thing I wouldn't say is realistic about like their backstory is that apparently Figrin D'an owns all of their instruments, which to me doesn't make sense because unless they're just performance instruments, because then how would they practice?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. But let's switch gears and start going through this the scene chronologically, or this set of minutes chronologically, and touching on any points that come up throughout. Does that sound all right to you?
Oh yeah, it's your
Okay.
world. I'm just rocking in it.
All right. Well, if you have any strong thoughts at any point, please, or any not strong thoughts, please interrupt. Okay, so we start with the inside of the cantina, and the music is playing, and the bartender says, "Hey, we don't serve their kind here." And Luke's like, "What? Your droids, they'll have to wait outside. We don't want them here." And Luke's like, "Why don't you just wait out by the speeder? We don't want any trouble." And 3PO. Oh, 3PO. I heartily agree with you, sir. He definitely wants to avoid trouble at all costs, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a little altercation. He doesn't like you. I'm sorry. I don't like you either. You just watch yourself. We're wanted men. I have the death sentence on 12 systems. I'll be careful. You'll be dead. Okay, so first of all, I kind of want to know what 12 systems he's wanted on.
Right. Also, why are you bragging about that? 12 is one thing. One is enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I get why he would brag about that sort of. I guess what it does is it kind of builds up the world of Tatooine as like someone who can be wanted on 12 systems, but still just be openly enjoying their time in this cantina because they just, it's a kind of a lawless place, I guess.
Yeah.
But what I think is funny is like, in retrospect, I'm like, it seems dubious that there would be even 12 independent systems to be wanted on. And it wouldn't just be like everything under Imperial control, like wanted by the,
Right.
Yeah, it presupposes like 12 independent systems. But anyway, so then he says, "This little one's not worth the effort. Come, let me get you something." All right, Chewbacca here is first mate on a ship that might suit us. So I guess Obi-Wan knows Chewbacca.
Yeah, so he was kind of talking to him in the background while, Luke is about to get his lights punched out. I think the iconic part about this scene is this is the second time we're seeing a lightsaber activated, but the first time we get to see it in action and how it interacts. So this is like the first time you hear that clash of a lightsaber on something.
That is true.
And I mean, I've always loved the sound of lightsabers, and I know you did the video the other day about how it's the reverse of it. And I remember discovering that as a kid playing one video game in particular. It was Jedi Knight, Jedi Academy, and I feel like that was, I mean, it's the Star Wars game I've played the most by far, but it was also like, there you could easily deactivate and activate a lightsaber, and I would just be like, doo, doo, doo. Wait a minute.
Oh.
There it is. And then my brother would look at me like, "You're just now figuring that out." And I'm like, "Sorry, I'm like 8."
That's interesting. Okay, so what Kris is talking about is, well, either you have listened to episode 7, which was the like 2.5-hour deep dive into lightsaber sound design, or you have seen the 36-second like just tiny little TikTok, which was just on the part about how the ignition is the same thing as the retraction sound, but backwards. And that is something that, like, in all of my years of Star Wars, I'd never really thought about. It's not that I didn't know, it's just that I never thought to ask that question. Like, I just didn't think to wonder about it, if that makes sense. And it wasn't until, like, I was preparing for that episode a few weeks ago where I was playing around with the sounds myself and figured that out. And so it makes sense that, the people that also knew this already found it out by experimenting on their own, or, whether it's playing, a video game or in some way having that experience. you
Yeah.
know? That just makes me, I think so much of music and sound is like having the space to just play around with stuff and discover stuff.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because there's sound. One of my favorite movies when it comes to like sound and music is August Rush, and how the character in that was able to find music in everything. And I think that's really evident in Star Wars because how the sound designs of the different things from like Chewbacca's roar to lightsaber to Darth Vader, like all came from real life things, and they just sort of put it together, and it's become iconic in how it represents.
Yeah, it was really like collaged in a very tactile, like in a very, I don't know, in a way that was super hands-on. And that's something that I think is so special about the original trilogy, especially, but not just like the original trilogy, just like, in the things happen in eras, right? So just because of the necessity of having to put more things together by hand, they just have a different aesthetic sometimes.
No, absolutely.
And I think, okay, so one of the like sort of initial rules or principles that was followed on this film was that whenever a lightsaber was happening or, was being activated or was on screen, there would not be music. And so we don't get music alongside a lightsaber until later on in the film. And here it kind of coincidentally, I mean, this is also when the music stops. So we're still following along with that principle is right from the outset, lightsabers were thought of as being really musical, musical in themselves, musical sounds. And they really wanted the sound of the lightsabers to be like regarded as such and to not be conflicting with the music. So yeah, here we have another instance of that. That happens to work like totally canon with the story too.
Right. Just happens organically.
Yeah. So then we cut to the street and we see 3PO pacing in front of the cantina. R2 is speaking with another astromech, and 3PO says, "I don't like the look of this." And then we hear this like kind of a weird cut. And I'm gonna play it. I don't know if. Okay, it's like a cut in the music.
I don't like the look of this.
It's coming up. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
I don't know what is behind that, but it's funny every time I hear it. It's sort of an artifact. It's probably an artifact of the editing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah, just the rampant change in songs, like that's not a natural song transition.
Yeah, like it cut off half a bar or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think, probably maybe we only know that because if we've heard the actual like soundtrack version of Cantina 2, we know it doesn't abruptly just like wrap up like that. But but yeah, that is in the film.
I wonder if there's a difference between like the original release version and subsequent special editions with that.
That's a good question. I am not sure at this point. I would guess. I would have to guess no, though. I think that would be more well known if that was a change. Although maybe not, because people tend to focus on visual changes in the different editions, even though there are also like definitely sound design changes too. People don't tend to focus on that as much. Yeah, good question. Another example of another big place where we really hear the worldizing of the Cantina music is in this transition where if you were to listen to the scene, not the soundtrack, but if you were to listen to this film without looking at it, you would be able to tell from just listening to it when we cut to the shot where we're looking at the Bith musicians, like where it focuses on the musicians rather than having them playing in the background. And so I'm gonna play this and maybe try. I mean, listeners, see for yourself if you can tell when there's like a POV shift. So in case you missed it, it was sort of that end part where it suddenly gets much louder and much more in the forefront.
Yeah, I was trying to like just play the scene out of my head, and I was like, all right, those are those two creatures talking. Those are those two creatures talking.
Yeah. And I'll play just that transition again. So here you can like really imagine that like now you have switched to just having the musicians playing in the background to like, oh, now I'm gonna walk right up to them and like see them in front of me. And then they're like really playing to you and you can really hear them that way. Worldizing. It's a really cool thing that is a lot in Star Wars quite a bit. All right. Moving on. Here now we are. Oh, Han Solo. Okay. So the original script says strange creatures play exotic big band music on odd-looking instruments as Luke, still giddy, downs a fresh drink and follows Ben and Chewbacca to a booth where Han Solo is sitting. Han is a tough, roguish star pilot, about 30 years old. A mercenary on a starship, he is simple, sentimental, and cocksure. And he goes, Han Solo, I'm captain of the Millennium Falcon. Chewie here tells me you're looking for passage to the Alderaan system. And here, of course, yes, indeed, if it's a fast ship. And so, fast ship, you've never heard of the Millennium Falcon? Should I have? It's the ship that made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. I've outrun Imperial starships, not the local bulk cruisers, mind you. Anyway, he's talking, he's bragging about his ship here. And what do you think? What do you think of this part?
Well, you know, it's Han being a blowhard, and I think it's a great introduction to him. You know, you hear like the confidence and cockiness in his voice, and then the condescension when you know he's like, "You haven't heard of the Millennium Falcon," and the interaction between Harrison Ford and Alec Guinness being the two veteran actors, being able to hear like their subtle tone changes as the conversation goes on versus, you know, like fresh Luke and fresh Mark Hamill in terms of acting are just, you know, just like full of energy and be like, we don't need this guy, you know, like I'm a pretty good pilot myself.
What do you think makes Han Solo sound cocky?
It's the why can't I think of the word right now? The cadence in which he speaks, the certain emphasis he puts on different words. You like, you haven't heard of the Millennium Falcon, and it's just, it made the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. Like, come on, can you? Where did you get raised on a farm? Kind of attitude. And you know, meanwhile Chewie's just sitting here like
looking
okay.
Okay. And what makes Luke not sound that way?
I think it's just because how he doesn't understand like the art of negotiation. You know, he's very, you know, he's younger, he's, you know, a teenager still. He wants to get in on this. He doesn't want to have to deal with like the nuance of a conversation. He's just like straight to the point. He's like, we don't need this guy. and that it shows how much of a world or how small of a world Luke has lived in versus Obi-Wan. Obviously, we know through additional media as we've seen it, but at that time we just knew him as like, oh, he fought in the Clone Wars, he's a Jedi. We didn't have a really good idea of what that meant, but at least in this scene we can see that he's been around the block.
Yeah, that's a good point. Luke definitely comes off as less of a skilled negotiator for sure. He also comes off as cocky to me, but it's like in a different way. It's like, Luke's like, we don't need this guy. And someone who doesn't have a lot of experience might actually be like, just totally suckered into it. Like, oh, okay, well, we need him, right? Like, I could see it going that way too. But Luke is like, he's cocky, but he's playing a shorter game, is what it is. Like Han, we see later, like he needs this job, but he's playing a longer game that involves like his whole, I don't know, it's like a poker face attitude where it's like he almost doesn't care. He's like, whatever. Yeah.
And pushing Luke's buttons with, he's like, oh, who's going to fly it, Junior? You.
Yeah. Yeah. Where someone else, like if that were me, I'd be like, well, I don't want to piss off. Like if I need this job, like I better not, he's confident, basically. Han is confident that he will like win this battle, and he's right. He's absolutely right.
And he ends up coming out ahead.
Yeah. Yep. He does speak really, really slowly, which is something that I've been noticing lately, is the slow, like gravitas of confident characters. And we were also talking about this in the lightsaber episode, but how Darth Vader's lightsaber ignition has a slower attack than some of the other ones, even though you might think like, oh, but the evil guy, like he has to have like a really fast igniting lightsaber. But actually, if you really compare the attacks of the like if you compare it to like Luke's green lightsaber in Return of the Jedi versus Darth Vader's first lightsaber ignition, which is it takes a time comparatively speaking. I've been thinking about speed and how sometimes the slower, calmer approach where it's like, we're running on my time right now, is sometimes like the most confident way a character can appear.
Right.
And Luke here is like speaking really fast. He's more like riled up. So checks out still. Then we cut to exterior shot, Mos Eisley, and Obi-Wan is telling Luke, you'll have to sell your speeder. And Luke's like, that's okay, I'm never coming back to this planet again. And finally, toward the end of the 5 minutes, we go back into the cantina and we get our first glimpse of Greedo. It's just the beginning of the Greedo scene. We don't fully see it here. We see that in the next 5 minutes. But we do see Greedo, and he says, going somewhere solo? And Han says, yes, Greedo. As a matter of fact, I was just going to see your boss. And that's where the 5 minutes ends. Greedo's voice, though.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to, the diegetic nature of it. Like we've heard some aliens speak before. We have no idea what they're saying. But now we have an alien that doesn't speak basic or English. And we know what they're saying. And this person that does speak basic is going to have a conversation, which is something we hadn't really gotten as much. We knew Uncle Owen was talking to the Jawas earlier, but we didn't know what they were saying. And 3PO was there to translate, and is there to translate for most of the following movies. But it's interesting to have this in-universe conversation between people speaking two different languages. And when we think about our real lives, it's like, okay, well, this is still person. This they're still human. Like we got it. But this is an even completely different kind of interaction.
Yeah. And well, it is assumed that a lot of the characters in Star Wars, it's like assumed that they can understand a bunch of languages, but then also not understand the ones that they need the droids for. So the fact that Han understands like Huttese here, well, if anyone's going to understand it, it's going to be someone who's a bounty hunter, probably. So that's that. And Greedo's voice has this like metallic kind of sound to it. Ben Burtt said that he put a flanger. Why can't I say it? Like I know what this is. Flanger. I don't know. I'm really bad at it. I know how it's spelled. It basically sounds like this. Going somewhere solo, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's I'm fascinated with the different sound treatment that different droids and different aliens get, because some of them, like the way that their voice comes out, like it in a way, like it tells you something about the anatomy of like their mouth and the way that the sound is being like traveled through the cavities in their face or whatever. And on a droid, it tells you something about like the shape of their mask, maybe, or like I don't know, just something about their parts. Yeah.
It reminds me, and going back to the game I was talking about, where I figured out the lightsaber sound was, you could play different species. So you had your humans, you had Keldors, so Plo Koon's people. You'd be a Rhodian, a Twi'lek, I think one other. And so, but there are also other creatures in the game that you would fight like that. And I still remember, like the Rhodians are a very distinctive, sound group, and the way their voice comes out, it reminds me of, those like musical, like pipes, like of different colors, and each one's a different note, and you would like hit it. It sounds like when you hit those, but like you're able to speak into it. So like your voice reverberates with the notes.
Oh. It's sort of like kazoo too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, because it kind of has like this like buzzing to it where it's like two different things are making noise and they're kind of like interacting with each other, and that's kind of how flangers. Why can't I say this freaking word? It's kind of how that works. Yeah, it is like that. It's also like when you're trying to like find your pitch, like the pitch that is most like resonant for you. And so like if you ever do like vocal practice, you can kind of go like and like you find this place where like if you stay on the note where it makes your head feel like it's alive, like everything starts buzzing, like in a way where it's like, oh, I hit the spot where like the way that my skull is and the way that my tongue hits the roof of my mouth, this is like a really resonant note for me where I wouldn't have to use much power for it to come out really strong.
Right.
There. Yeah. That's fascinating. On a previous episode, I spoke with Anthony Hansen, who voiced Luke Skywalker in one of the Battlefront games. And he was like telling me about all the different ways that like your tongue placement and like just all the different ways to manipulate your mouth and all the different, types of voices and like the musicality of like basically of speaking, which is absolutely part of the final sound mix, because music and sound effects have to be, they have to be out of the way for vocals, and things are mixed differently in films a lot of the time. I mean, they're always mixed differently for the film and the soundtrack, because the film versions have to leave space and they have to accommodate all the other things in the soundtrack as a whole. Like the soundtrack in the film context refers to like everything that you hear in the track in sound, basically the whole soundscape, if that makes sense. So yeah, like you can't have too many things competing in the same like frequency band.
Yeah, I find it fascinating. I think these past couple of years, listening to like voice actors and how they talking about like how they prepare and they do different voices, um, and like people that do impressions, like like Frank Caliendo, who can just do so many impressions, just like start a sentence in one voice, middle of the sentence another voice, last part of the sentence in another voice, and it's just like not a beat. And I was like, I got like five voices, all right, and I don't know how quickly I can switch them.
What are your
Uh,
voices? I know Vader. You do a really great Vader.
yeah, so I do Vader. You do you remember those Old Spice commercials with the like,
They're
"Hello,
still
ladies,
on.
look back at your men. Now back to me.
I
Now back at your
literally,
men."
I just saw one like last night. I think they still have the same guy.
Okay, is he back? Because they went through different periods where it was him, then it was like Fabio, then it was like Terry Crews, and then he came back for like a yeah. So Isaiah
I do
Mustafa,
remember. I do remember what you're saying though.
yeah, Isaiah Mustafa. So his voice, Heath Ledger's Joker. Um, who else do I got? See, I remember them organically. I never remember when I think about them. Uh, so yeah, there are a couple others out there.
Any other Star Wars ones?
Well, I guess I have a little bit of Atlanta. Just hello, what have we here?
Okay. Yeah, Lando has like a cadence, or I mean, they all have a cadence, but
Hmm.
it's not just about getting the pitch. It's about there's so much. It's not just getting the right pitch because you have that like bass register, but you nailed like the shape of Lando's phrase there.
Yeah, I don't ask me how I did it. I just did. Like people were like, "You cosplay as him. Can you do the voice?" I was like,
I feel like the original trilogy, or at least A New Hope, has such interesting like vocal cadences in the dialogue.
hmm
And a previous guest, Ender Smith, told me that a lot of the voices, at least for the Imperials, were done by like voiceover actors, and that's why a lot of them sound so like I don't know, radio-y. But to
hmm
me, it doesn't read as radio-y. It reads as like that's what Star Wars sounds like.
Oh, okay,
So,
yeah.
but yeah, like I think of like Darth Vader, like I want them alive. Like just the emphasis of like certain words is so memorable.
Yeah, it's interesting. James Earl Jones as doing the ADR work for Vader, and just how it's changed over the years in the different times he's done it. From A New Hope to even Empire is different than A New Hope to the brief part or Revenge of the Sith, and definitely now in Rebels and Rogue One as he's gotten older. Um, you can still hear the Darth Vader, but like this is an older James Earl Jones.
Yeah. And Mark Hamill, like out of the people in this scene, Mark, or I guess Harrison Ford, but he doesn't really come back much. Mark Hamill's voice has definitely changed from this like super naive Luke as well.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Okay. There are a few other things that I wanted to say about Ben Burtt and the sounds in the cantina. For one, like I don't know, maybe we can like just throw out all the random things that we're hearing in this scene because there's like a lot of random stuff.
hmm
Like I was just taking random notes. I don't have an exhaustive list or anything, but like there's laughing, there's like bleeding sheep at some point, or sounds like that.
You hear the sort of the groan slash roar of the dewbacks,
Yeah.
um, the just sort of like the faint background of not traffic, but the ongoings of outside of Mos Eisley. The stormtroopers. We'll check it out.
Yes. Oh, I think I heard like a bottle pop, like a champagne bottle pop or something at the
Hmm
beginning. And I also thought I heard like the Tusken Raider sound reused. I'm not really sure though. You know what I'm talking about?
Or what part?
Sort of in the first minute of this scene, maybe. I'm not really sure, but something sounded like It reminded me of Tusken Raider. Reminded me of Tusken Raider voice. It was like a little bit of that like it's kind of percussive. I don't know. It reminds me of like when Obi-Wan is doing the Krayt Dragon siren call and there's like a lot of sounds happening at once there. One of them like something in there reminds me of something we heard in the cantina. I don't know exactly
Can you
what
play
it was. Let's see. I hope it's nope. No, I didn't hear it there. Although, what is that? You know what I mean?
That sounds like so. The only creature I can think of that made a sound like that is like some imperial spy. I can't remember their name, but
Oh, with the long nose?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the sound I remember it making.
Oh, okay. Is that the one that stands outside?
Yeah, and then the only other time I remember you seeing them is right before like the Imperials come crashing down on them at the Millennium Falcon.
And are they kind of like holding a comm link?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Weren't they designed after something in the like Black Plague?
Yeah, the they look like the doctors in the Black Plague
Yeah,
with
that's
like
what
the
it is.
bird masks.
Yeah. I'm pulling up the clip of the Tusken Raider thing, but also there's clapping at a certain point, which I think is a nice touch.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's when the song is changing.
Yeah, the people appreciating the music, which is it's nice to see them getting their due.
Yes. I do want to shout out the band a little bit more in a second. Here, tell me if you can hear this. Okay, now I'm scrubbing through. Did you hear the Tusken Raider part? So musicians never get... Oh my gosh, what an amazing score. Oh my gosh. Okay. I can't find it, but there's just so many sounds happening. It's amazing. So bands like I feel like they never get the cred. They never get the cred on screen, or also they're often not credited like in the credits of people who played music and stuff. So I want to make sure to shout out the band really quick. Okay. The band members. They're Figrin D'an and the Modal Nodes. There's 7 of them. The number is debatable according to different sources, but the instruments, that's what I'm interested in, because I'm interested in I'm interested in when these instruments recur in other films and TV shows, and if the corresponding music that comes out of them kind of sound similar. I'm curious how how tightly that design process has been. So the kloo horn is what Figrin D'an plays, and apparently it's like a pretty common instrument in the Star Wars universe. It kind of looks like a saxophone, and maybe it corresponds to the saxophone sound. It also kind of looks like a bassoon. Basically, it has like a reed and a mouthpiece, and it has an S-shaped body. There's also the fanfar, which, I don't know, maybe that's like trumpet. I don't know. They're all kind of like wind instruments. There's also the Gassan string drum, the bandfill, Dorenian Beshniquel, and my favorite, because it really could be anything, the ommni box. And the ommni box, spelled OMMNI box, it seems sort of like an effects pedal. Like it can kind of alter the sound of like the bass and stuff. So I don't know. That sounds like the instrument where if the music doesn't correspond with what we're seeing on screen, you can just assume that the music is being modulated through this Omni box, and that can account for any instrumental discrepancies.
Yeah, I know the kloo horn. I think is what when so when I was in middle school and I was playing the saxophone, like I made my dad get me a music book that was like different Star Wars pieces. So I know like when playing the Cantina Band, it was just like and looking at the different ones, I was like, okay, yeah, that was probably what I was playing because I think
Oh,
the band fill looks like a French horn if I remember correctly. Kind of.
yeah, it does, which is not exactly on the recording, but it is like a
Yeah.
wind instrument. It could
Hmm.
be the trumpet part. Yeah, something like that. It kind of mostly works. So the actual instruments recording this cue are two saxophones, a trumpet, a clarinet, a Rhodes piano, steel drums, drum kit, Oggs percussion, and an ARP synthesizer for those low bass notes like do do. Oh, my piano's not on. Do 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 do. And
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, and the only other time that we hear steel pan drums is in Canto Bight.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Where were we? We were talking about the musicians. Okay. Yeah. So, Mad About Me is that song, and If Only I Could Let Go and Cry is the other one. Definitely want to shout out like how like what good of a job they did syncing up the music with the on-screen movement, because that is actually really hard to do.
Hmm.
There are many examples, countless examples throughout media where you can, or at least I can tell that when they were filming, they didn't have the music and people were maybe like grooving to the wrong beat, or
Hmm.
musicians were playing to the wrong thing and it didn't really sync up. I myself have been in that situation. As the start of my career was mainly as a sideliner, which is basically an on-screen musician in TV shows and stuff.
Hmm.
So oftentimes, or not often, actually, the bulk of my work was on a TV show called Glee, which was about a high school glee club. And there was always a band of musicians that just like would spring up. So I was one of those. And that was like a case where, since it was a musical show, they would always film with the music playing in the background. So everything was always synced up like it was a music video. Like we knew ahead of time what we would be playing. But there was one show that I did where I revisited the episode last night just to see if it was as bad as I remember. I'm not saying the show was bad, by the way. I'm just saying you can tell that we did not know what we were playing at this part. It was like this show that only lasted one season called 1600 Pen. And there's this part where the person, Josh Gad's character, is like, can you play this? And we're like, no. And then he's like, play something mid-tempo romantic. And we start just like, I don't know, like if you look at the three violins that are in the frame, we're just playing like, honestly, just like random stuff. It doesn't sync up with the whatever music they put on top of it, and it looks fake. So
Yeah. I know. So my brother's a filmmaker, and so he just did his first feature film, released it this year. We were filming it last year, and I remember there's a part where like one of the characters, she's a DJ, so she does mixes, and so he was playing like an example of the mix, like of the similar beats, like when the characters are like listening to it and dancing to it, like it wouldn't make sense. So they're just not like, because I think there were a couple takes we did where we did it without music, and it's just like y'all are dancing to different beats.
yeah, yeah, it's something that is so, you don't notice when it goes right, but you like notice when it goes wrong.
Hmm.
So so Star Wars like did it really well. Like
Oh yeah.
this to me, this scene feels like seamless. And from a musical perspective, like I'm really critical of media, of like whenever there's like going to be a music scene, because I just
Hmm.
notice all the things that go wrong, and here I don't notice like anything going wrong basically. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, pretty impressive. Let's see. Is there anything else that you I'm looking through. Oh, okay. Sorry. There's two more things that I wanted to make sure to cover. One of them is for a lot of those like alien voices, Ben Burtt recorded a lot of different, not only sounds like dogs growling and different animals and things. He did this for the Jawas too. He recorded a bunch of people who were fluent in Swahili and Haya and recorded them like he didn't create a whole language like Lord of the Rings style or anything like that. But he wanted to, the reason he used like real language as a basis was because a real language already has like nuances built into it. You know what I mean? Like just so it's already so nuanced as like a developed thing rather than just like trying to make up like 5 words and 5 phrases or something.
Right.
So I think that's really evident because even though it's not like necessarily, or at least even though originally it wasn't the types of languages where you could match up every word to like a dictionary, it still like sounded really real because it was already like based on something that was developed.
Right.
And
It's different from the was it when they're gonna put like when they're just gonna ADR like random conversation over you and they just tell you to say like watermelon just to get the mouth moving.
yeah, that's my trick, watermelon.
It
Well,
was
not
like
not mine.
watermelon. I think like rutabaga. I think is the
Yeah.
other one.
That's my 5th grade choir trick. I never knew the lyrics. The last thing is for the background babble of voices, which Ben Burtt calls the walla. It's a group of the editors together on the film, and they all got balloons full of helium, and everybody inhaled a good dose. And helium makes your voice like go up in pitch. It makes you sound really high pitch, and it makes you laugh a lot. So that is the background of the Cantina, is the editors on helium.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. There's so many of these little like fun, I don't know. I feel like it would just be really fun to be part of the team that works on this and to get to like do that.
Yeah, and it's such sound design is art. Like, there's a reason why it's won so many awards. It is incredibly impressive each time that it comes out. The immersing the viewer, the audience member, in the world, from from the sounds of the creatures that are made, the sounds of war. Like, everyone remembers the seismic charge. That's like iconic to lightsabers ignition, to when there is no sound, like the Haldo maneuver. Just the sound design in Star Wars is one of the best in cinema.
Do you have any personal favorites from all of Star Wars?
Like sound designs.
Yeah, and then also music.
Okay, so sound design, the seismic charge, the roar of the Millennium Falcon when it cuts on, hyperspace.
Like just going into it.
Yeah, jumping into hyperspace. And there's just something so satisfying about the Death Star's blast, just the hum as it goes down, as they're starting to activate everything.
Oh.
Yeah, there's just something so satisfying about it.
Oh. Interesting. Okay, what about music?
Music. So I'm going to do it by trilogy. So my prequels, Duel of the Fates, Across the Stars, Battle of the Heroes, Anakin's Betrayal, and Anakin's Dark Deeds. Like, I love all of those so much. I feel like the prequels are John Williams like best. Not that anything he has done in Star Wars is bad, but like those are just, I feel like he really showed out for the prequels. For the originals, Binary Sunset, Leia's theme, obviously the main theme. Um, One that doesn't get a lot of love is Lando's theme, or the Bespin theme in Episode 5, and then the Imperial March and the Emperor's theme.
I don't hear very many people say Emperor's theme. Interesting.
Yeah. And when I said that, it made me think of like the ending of Episode 1. Like I hear it sometimes, but I'm also like, is this just my brain hearing this, or is this actual true? Like they say that the ending of Episode 1, that celebration theme, is the inverse of the Emperor's theme.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. It's not the inverse, but it. You're talking about Augie's goes da 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 da
Mm-hmm.
da 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 da, and Emperor's theme goes dee 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 dee. It's actually like not the okay. This is Emperor. Okay, so it's these notes, and Augie's is. So the notes aren't exactly the same, but the shapes of the phrases are pretty much the same. So it's like, yes, that's it's not like a secret thing. That's what people are referring to. It's not like an inverse or anything. But Augie's is obviously faster and higher pitched. But yeah, it is reminiscent. It kind of echoes the Emperor's theme.
And then for the sequel trilogy, Rey's theme, the Jedi steps, the March of the Resistance, the First Order's theme. And so this isn't in the movie, but it's in the Battlefront 2 game. Finn's theme in the Battlefront 2 game.
What is it?
Uh,
Is
you
it on
have
the
to look
soundtrack?
of the game, yeah. So like you could find it on YouTube really easily because
So it's not by John Williams?
No. So the only
Okay.
Finn theme we have for the sequel trilogy is sort of like
Scherzo for X-Wing.
the action theme in The Force Awakens, like every time they're running, which I'm like, well, that's very symbolic for Finn's character, but I kind of want something else.
Yeah. Agree. Interesting. I didn't know that Finn had a separate theme for Battlefront 2. That's cool. I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah, they give if any character doesn't have like a distinct theme, like a hero, then they give them their own theme. So like Lando's is the same as the one in Empire.
The Cloud City
'cause-
one. Or
right?
the Bestman one. Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, cool. Video games are a place where I don't have much experience in, so I always like to ask questions when someone plays video games. And always like video game people have a unique relationship with sound. No doubt, like the repetition of playing a game that has sounds associated with it does something to you. And yeah, makes you discover stuff like the lightsaber ignition and retraction when you're 8. So that's cool.
I played Jedi Knight Jedi Academy dozens of times. Like it's still my favorite game, and that game is almost 20 years old at this point.
Nice.
But I think one of the things earlier this year when like I was talking with Finn with like several people, and they were talking about like, Finn doesn't have a theme, and I was like, I want to look into this. So I found I found John Boyega saying like this is I want to say this was on the red carpet of The Force Awakens, or maybe pre The Force Awakens actually premiering, where he's talking to an interviewer and he's like, yeah, I have a theme. So I'm like, well, if he says he has one, I have to find it. So I found this, I don't know, it seemed like a dissertation that someone had done. But it was just like this entire breakdown of all the Star Wars films. I can't remember if they did the TV shows as well, but like all the different themes and motifs of John Williams, Michael Giacchino, and every like how they all fit in all the different movies that they're in and everything like that. So like I have it downloaded somewhere. I'll send it to you.
Are you talking about Frank Lehman's complete catalog of the musical themes of Star Wars?
Maybe I have to.
It's like a 70-something page, just like the motifs and everything.
That sounds right. Is it like a PDF you can click on and it'll take you? Okay, that might be right.
Yeah, he's been on the show twice, and that I always recommend that resource for listeners. Definitely check it out. He keeps it updated. It's available for free on his website. The complete catalog of the musical themes of Star Wars. It lists the leitmotifs, the incidental motifs, action set piece themes, associative progressions. There's like transcriptions, but also like text descriptions if you don't read music. And you can just at least see the names of things. And there's like a thematic census at the end where it tells you like how many times each theme shows up in each film. And it's a really interesting resource, especially to compare trends and to see like maybe where some themes were really prominent in one film and then maybe died out. Rose's theme. And so yeah, definitely check that out, listeners.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, that's definitely it. I just Googled it. Yep. That's it.
Yeah. So what did he say about Finn's theme?
So, it's Finn's. It's also, Pursuit. So I know that because the reason why I was looking it up was because people were talking about love themes and how, Samuel Kim, he had done a mashup of Kylo Ren's theme and Rey's theme as a sort of love theme. And so, people were talking about, okay, well, like, what would fit the Finn Poe theme be? And I was just like, well, okay. I didn't know at the time that Finn had a theme. So I was just like, what if you sort of did what the Imperial March and the, I can't remember the piece's name, but the end of episode 1's, like
Young
you
Anakin's.
did that.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, okay. So you mean Emperor and Augie's?
Yes, Emperor and Augie's. And you did that with like the First Order's theme with Finn, and you merged it into March of the Resistance. And I was like, I can't do that musically, but I can think about it.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, so here's the interesting thing here's the tricky thing about themes is that themes aren't official. Themes are things that fans, like, I think of a theme is a pattern that we pick up on when something occurs enough times that we're like, oh, that must be a theme. And then we decide what that theme applies to. And it's easy when it's like always associated with a character, like Rey's theme. It's pretty obvious. Like Rey is introduced with what we know to be her theme. Like there are some characters that are really obvious that they have a theme and it's their character. But there are some themes that are like maybe for an idea or like some other thing that is a noun, but like not necessarily a person. Like the Force is one example. And the thing is, like, John Williams himself doesn't say like, hey, everyone, now that the film's out, I'm just going to tell you, these are the 10 new themes. These are the whatever. He himself has not confirmed like almost any of them. Like, or he will, like in interviews, he'll be like, oh yeah, so I wrote a little thing for Luke and Leia and I wrote a thing for that. Like he'll say a little bit, but he would not, I would highly doubt that he himself would say like, hey everyone, this is Finn's theme. So unless it's like named on something, I don't want to say it doesn't count, but it's all speculation. Even with Force theme, that's why some people call it Force theme, some people call it Binary Sunset, some people call it Obi-Wan Kenobi's theme. Theme names it's like what it means to you, like what it means to each person consuming the media, I guess. Sometimes it's less obvious. Sometimes it is obvious. Sometimes we need more information. Finn is someone with that I personally I wish that there were more, like, I wish that it was not so dubious, like what the answer, I wish it were more obvious,
Yeah, because I mean, what we associate with him musically is that pursuit where, like, they're running from the Rathars, they're running from the first order TIE pilot shooting down. They're running a lot, so it's the dun 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 dun, dun and it's just like, well, there's a lot of running that he's doing, so so I think it fits, and then we hear like hints of it in eight, and I think nine. I know we hear it a bit at the beginning of eight, um, but that's one of the reasons why like I like the designated like theme that he has in Battlefront 2, because it's like it's more, I think, grand, but I also think there's like when your focus is on a character and you're like, all right, you have 30 seconds to come up with something for this character. You can do it, as opposed to like, like you were saying, John Williams isn't like, okay, I wrote something for Luke and Leia, but hasn't like confirmed the themes. It's, you just, it's what we associate with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's such different modes of of storytelling, and films. I mean, at least I think ideally films make you work for it a little bit more, or they ideally, to me, it dawns on you after a certain amount of time, but you're not even clear of while it's dawning on you, and until suddenly you realize you just know.
Right.
So,
I'm gonna turn my light on because the time has changed, and so the sun has gone down in my part.
Okay, yeah, no worries. All right, so that was a nice little diversion. Are you ready for the Star Wars Music Minute questionnaire?
Yes, let's do this.
Awesome. In exactly 3 words, what does Star Wars sound like?
A galactic symphony.
A galactic symphony?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, number 2, what is something related to Star Wars music or sound that you want to learn more about?
Well, now I want to do a deeper dive into themes again, because I do have Frank Lehman's document like downloaded probably 3 or 4 times now on my computer because I keep losing it. But I want to do a deeper dive into that.
Sweet. That's probably good because he keeps updating it. So when you keep up downloading it, it's the newest version. Okay, and finally, what is a score or soundtrack that you're fond of besides anything Star Wars?
I had to think about this one. It was tough, but Interstellar's theme, not Interstellar's theme, Interstellar soundtrack, Tron Legacy.
Is that the Daft Punk one?
Yes.
That's
and
one of my favorites too.
Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom. It's also Micah Giacchino. Specifically one song, and it's I find the title of it hilarious.
He's really good at naming stuff.
Yeah, when I was watching it in the theater, I was just like, oh man, I need to look up the soundtrack as soon as this is over. But it's called The World's Worst Bedtime Storyteller. And
that's a Giacchino title.
You've seen the movie? Have you seen the movie?
No.
Okay.
Wait, is that the newer one?
Yeah, that's the last one to come out.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, no, it just fits. So it's hilarious in the context of the scene, but it's just such a, you can tell that, like the director, I can't remember his name. He said like this was going to be more of like a horror type of Jurassic Park movie, because that's what his background was doing horror films. And so you can really hear it at that part. Like this is the monster revealing itself kind of track, and it's just awesome.
Nice. Okay, well I will list those 3 all in the show notes. Listeners, there are no themes, leitmotifs in this, but there's source music, and it is the Cantina Band 1, or the Cantina Band and Cantina Band 2. That is also what you can find on the soundtrack if you have any of those versions. I did the Shazam test, which is when I just play the minutes and repeatedly refresh Shazam to see what other stuff pops up. Sometimes it pops up stuff that has samples of whatever's in the scene, and there's a lot. So there's something called Sunset Over Manon by Atlas. There's a song called Alderaan by Greenlight Silhouette. There's a song called Revenge of the Jedi, Howard Bronson. Electric Groove Stand, Supreme X. Obi-Wan, the name of the song. by, I don't know how to pronounce the name, but it's spelled ZXZZER, and Sauce Dad 69, and Bounty Hunters by Rugsop. So a lot of things on the Shazam test today. Kris, where can people find you?
You can find me on TikTok, Twitch, and Instagram as Star Wars Lawyer, all one word. And you can find my podcast, Too Black, Too Nerdy, on wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean.
Do you spell it with the number 2?
No, so we do TOO.
For both of them?
People, so if people refer to it as like the number, still works because there are 2 of us and we're both black nerds, so it works.
Nice. Awesome. Well, listeners, thank you for sticking with this journey for another episode. Next week, we'll be continuing in the Cantina, getting to the Greedo scene. And if you have any questions, or if you have any fan mail that you want to send Dan or Figrin D'an and the Modal Nodes, if you want to show the band some love, you can leave them a voice message at starwarsmusicminute.com/comlink, where you can anonymously or not press a button and record a voice message, and I might play some of them on the show. So you can do that, and you can follow me at Star Wars Music Minute or Star Wars Musemin, depending on the platform. You can also watch this on YouTube if you are listening to the podcast. That is all I have for today, and yeah, I'll see you next week on Star Wars Music Minute.